everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. We got our good friend Luke Archer back, and Luke is the creator of something called Verbal Aikido. And Luke was at the Stoa before, but if you weren't at that session or didn't watch it, Verbal Aikido, and I'll read out kind of the elevator pitch, is a practical and fun to learn solution to diffuse conflictual situations, transform verbal aggression into peaceful relationships, and increase your well-being. Who wouldn't want some of that in their life? So this is the first part of a 3-part practicum. And this session will be about receiving the attack. Next week will be about accompanying the attack. And then the last week will be about channeling the attack. And so these are like the 3 parts of the Verbal Aikido methodology, which is quite elegant. And I quite enjoy this technique, and it's effective and it works, and it's quite beautiful. So how today's going to work, I'm going to tag in Luke in a moment, and he's going to share his screen. We're just going to talk about receiving the attack. And then we're going to have some exercise, and we'll have some Q&A. I think, I don't know what the time was, but I think maybe we'll just say 60 minutes. And then, but if we can stay a little later, if Luke, you want that, we can do that as well. So that being said, I will allow Luke to unmute himself and give him access to share his screen. Welcome back to the Stoa, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Really happy to be here. So happy that you guys are still interested in this stuff. Yeah, I'm very happy to go for an hour or so. If you want to go further, I'm totally comfortable with, if you guys have got questions, or if you want to see from a few more practice moves and things like that. So just sort of a framework for the thing today. If you guys have questions, please do throw them at me. I mean, this is, in fact, what we generally do in dojo practice, verbal dojo practice, is say, if you've got any shares, any questions, or any attacks. Any attacks you have, they're extremely welcome, and they give us a sort of an opportunity to illustrate the practice. So these guys do feel comfortable to throw whatever you have at me, and you'll probably sense a little bit of the practice, and it'll help other people, again, sort of understand more about what it is. So just in a couple of minutes, I'm gonna just, so the rollout for today is, in the first couple of minutes are going to be sort of an overview of what the practice is about. I'm going to try and sort of bring you into, as Peter said, this first step today. There's 3 steps. We'll look into it more, but we'll start to look at this main sort of initial, or yes, it's a fundamental part of the practice, which is what we call centering. I'm sure you guys know a lot about that already. But we're going to look at how that transforms into what we call the verbal map, and I hope you guys are going to get some practice in today. So a little bit later, after we've started to look at a few of the techniques, I'm going to let you guys get into some breakout rooms and actually practice some of the stuff. Now, like I said, we can talk about this pretty much till the cows come home. It's a passion for me. It's something that I'm obviously keenly interested in sharing about. That said, if you don't practice, you don't get to feel it. And really, that is what it's about. It's about stepping onto the mat and sensing the moves, sensing your posture, and sort of being in real contact with the other person. So that's the kind of the plan for today. I'm going to just jump into, and if we can share the screen here with you guys. Here we go. All right. You guys seeing that? You got that up? There we go. All right. So, yeah, there's, like I said, there's
start one because I've got something that'll spruce up your Monday.
That's interesting.
It's clean your room day.
Sorry, it's Alexa.
It's your Monday,
yeah. Okay. So we got one extra person in the dojo today.
Start one because I've got something that'll spruce up your Monday.
Let me just.
She's engaging in the attacks already on you. You can't.
She's throwing stuff at me. I don't know what it is. I've just asked her to put herself on mute there for the time being. Okay. So basically, yes, the outset of the dojo. It's when we're in training, we're looking at 3 steps. But here is basically what we start to do as soon as we get onto the mat, we look at what we call getting centered. As I said, that's kind of a thing that a lot of people are familiar with. We don't have one fixed way to get centered, but essentially what it is drawing your attention into the me, into oneself. So we'll look at that more. If you've got any questions on it, I'm very happy to share. So what we're doing in that technically on the mat is to start exploring that space between the stimulus. So if we perceive something as an attack and the response we have to it. And really that's where our power is drawn from, bringing ourselves back to the center. Key aspect of the practice. And again, not just a sort of a thing you do once, but you're continually being drawn off center and then coming back to it. Really key part of the practice. The second thing that we do from the outset of the training is always this, we call it enhanced listening. Now, you may be familiar with things like active listening. It's a bit more than that. It's a very sort of neutral style of listening. So, and it's kind of the magical part of the practice, in the sense that once you're able to get into that posture of what we call neutral listening, that really is the very key part of the energy shift that happens within an exchange. Again, we'll come back to that later. Probably a little bit more in second session too. And this, we're actually asking people to be very courageous when they get onto the mat here, because what they are doing is being confronted with difficulties, and it is that confrontation and sort of repeated you know, I guess opportunities to be in situations where they're feeling attacked, and that they're able to sort of use the movements to be able to practice and become more and more comfortable with transforming it. So really these are the sort of the three things that people will get into right from the get-go. So I'm seeing that there are a few things in the chat. Let me see if I can grab that chat thing there. Hold on.
People are just talking about how Alexia is trolling you. So
she's true. Okay, that's it. All right. Okay. Peter, if there are questions that come up, can you just chime them in and throw them at me, please? Okay. Thank you. All right. So this is essentially the movement that you're going to notice. As I mentioned, they're not sort of linear. It's really just sort of 1, 2, 3, but moving in sort of in constant movement, like a dance, really. So as you can see at the bottom there, you've got the focus on me. So you're going to aim at sort of bringing yourself back to, or as close to, your center and that sort of recognition of self. Then there's going to be a move off of that towards the other person. Trying to understand. Now, that is key. Sincerity is so key in this practice. And if you're just using a technique to try and understand the other person, but you don't have that desire to truly understand them, they notice it, and people will detect insincerity. So it won't be as effective as all. And then it's, again, once you've started to understand it with the person a bit more, then you can sort of maybe reach towards and propose an us movement, which again has that very nice, often very nice sort of de-escalating effect on an exchange. So essentially that's what we're always practicing on the mat. And again, it seems simple like that, great, but behind each step there is a whole universe of practice that we can look into. So here's a little bit more on what we do in each workshop or each training. We focus on reflexes. The training is reflex development. People often might sort of come and say, oh, I get it. But it is only after years of practice that people start to actually be able to use it and properly in their lives. And I say properly, I mean effectively, that they'll actually see that with the movements that they are connecting more with the other person, and being able to sort of be better understood themselves. So it is that sense of a martial art, but in that sense of sort of discipline. So we develop our posture through interactive activities, as I mentioned, it really is sort of going backwards and forwards on the mat. What we call sparring. So each workshop, as I sort of covered in that last slide, is you're getting stabilized, you're coming to center, you're empathizing, going towards the other person, you're harmonizing, going into that us movement. And authenticity and sincerity, these are all key in the practice, and going towards balance. So I'm going to get you guys to do this over the next couple of weeks if you can. Bring your attacks. It is almost like a recycling center. So people will sort of come with all the negativity or all the difficulties they had in the week, and they'll say, okay, you know, so my wife said to me, "You're never there when I need you," or my boss said to me, "This isn't on time," or whatever it is. That the anything that creates tension is an actual opportunity to practice. And the more real it is, the better you get into real practice on this. So that's the during. So we've had the before, or the start and the during, and here's what we can say sort of after the training. People have recognized sort of a personal leadership and increased assertiveness. So we'll look at it a little bit today, but that idea of being skilled in centered expression is key. Sort of coming back to that center and being able to express yourself from there. We talk about, people talk about clarity and serenity in interpersonal communication. Notably, a lot of people have talked about this with their kids or teenagers, that it is, it really heightens that connection that they can have, but on all levels, of course, too. Again, key, that sort of sense of listening, and it's an enormous part of the practice that we do. We've got lots and lots and lots of fun activities that we explore, and that called stretching, which I know Peter's a big fan of. The third thing that people will notably recognize as an outcome of the training is this idea of a sustainable relationship development. So becoming more and more aware of, I guess, the ecology of relationships. So of course, there's loads of, you can check out our YouTube channel. There's lots of testimonials there, and you're very, very welcome to listen to what other people have said too. So right, that's the kind of the overview of the practice. I would like to get some questions on that if people have any, or if anything needs to be clarified before I get you guys sort of set up to get into breakout groups. So have at it, guys.
I can field a few questions and see if the chats get warmed up. Do you want to share your screen still, or do you want to?
Oh yeah, I can get rid of that for the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this so? I really like this kind of like the receiving the attack and the first step about kind of like focusing on me and that fight or flight response that kicks in. So this is what you referred to before as the inner smile. Is that correct? How to perceive it? Cool. And
yeah, there's a few technical terms. I mean, we talk about yes, the inner smile as that sort of first step. I mean, it's very personal for everyone. They might have their own little name for it, and they're very welcome to it. And on the second step, we talk about irimi, which is again, it's a Japanese term, which basically means sort of entering into the other person, like a sort of a river enters into a tributary enters into a river. And then the third step is what we call aiki, or proposing aiki. So aiki is again, I mean, that's what Aikido is about. Maybe I should have started with that. But yeah, Aikido is, so ki, you probably all know ki, which is the sort of idea of energy or spirit. The do is that way or the path, and the I is the sort of the idea of harmony or convergence of energies. So you've got this idea of the way to harmonize energies. That's basically the idea of Aikido.
yeah, and I guess I'll just also share a reflection. Because I know many people who like do a lot of spiritual practices, whether meditation or breath work, and they're like super calm in that domain. But then when they get into like a social skill domain where there's public speaking or just interacting with a group, then they get nervous or awkward or whatever. And so I find it's really great to have sort of a space where you can practice this calmness in a social dynamic, and nothing's better than like the intensity of getting like verbally attacked, where a fight or flight response ensues, and then maintaining a groundedness within that. So I appreciate this practice for that reason. So we have one question. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you have any, but we'll turn to Sahil. Sahil, you can ask your question.
Hey, hi. Can you hear me fine? Cool.
Yes.
Hi,
Yep.
Luke.
Hi, Say.
So I noticed when you were talking about focus and attention, like who to focus on, there wasn't much in the way of like being sensitive to the audience when it's a public setting. So, like for example, right now, who has key between the two of us is kind of determined by the perceptions of the audience here, right? Like if I was to throw a cute witticism at you, that wouldn't work for the audience of the Stoa, but it might work in a different setting. It might work at a bar. And is that something that you've like made a part of your system?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's this kind of key idea about attacks. I mean, what we define attacks are if you feel tension. I mean, if like I could say one thing to you and it might go right over your head. I could say the same thing to Peter and you're like, oh, why are you saying, you know, so he might feel attacked by that. So it doesn't really matter. Like I said, you know, any sort of sense of tension is an opportunity. So whether it's in a bar or it's here or whatever, you know, like personally, I used to, I think one of the things that my son said that he said, the biggest difference with you since you've done Verbal Aikido is you don't get annoyed at the printer anymore, which is big, which was big for me because, you know, I could recognize that tension and it all comes back to that same thing, no matter what the outside influence is. Where I'm feeling this tension, it's an opportunity for me to go, how can I, you know, how can I get back to center? You just know that when you're centered, the results of whatever you're trying to do are going to be better. So it does take time and practice to come back to that center and just coming to there and then going, okay, so what do I need to understand about this sincerely? And then how can I move forward with this, whatever's being thrown at me? And it's that constant dance of that. So whether it's in a bar or whether it's online or whether it's with your printer or whatever it is, it always comes back to, does that answer your question, Sahim?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there would probably be like, for me, it would be important to figure out, like, classify the kinds of tensions created by the audience for myself, maybe for whoever. But I think, like, like, you've sort of taken the agnostic route where it doesn't really matter. It's just all in here. You've got to work on things inside here, which is interesting, but I would also like the other side.
Yes, I guess it does all sort of come back down to self. And as much as we often start to work with people and who will feel that they're attacked from external sources, essentially, I think what I've noticed just from my own practice and from the people's practice too, they've noticed it, is that the more they're able to work on internal attacks, what we call, you know, where you find you're either attacking yourself, then the easier it is to manage any other sort of attack coming from the outside. For example, silence. If somebody is not answering you, for example, you might see that as tension, you might see that as an attack. But if you sort of delve deeper into understanding it, then you might recognize that you've interpreted the silence to mean something. And it's what your interpretation of that silence is that actually is the attack that you're giving to yourself. I think we can go a lot further than that about it, but yeah, that's yeah. There's definite there's definite sort of opportunities to work on all different sorts of contexts. One of them is yourself, one of them is just one other person, and of course, if there's a large group of people, we would talk about sort of that's more advanced practice, but it's the same thing. If there's a group of people coming at you, well then you're still coming back to the same 3 steps, but of course with sort of more advanced techniques. Great question, Sam. Thanks.
Yeah, the thing that comes up for me is I can picture myself in situations where, you know, someone was like kind of being a little like, let's say unpleasant, but he was talking in such a way that it was addressing the whole group, not just towards me. And so it was like, oh, not just kind of I'm dealing with this individual, I'm dealing with the whole audience too, to kind of like save face in a way. And it seems like there's a subtle, I think that's what Sahil was gesturing it towards, is like there's a subtle art form of just like dealing with one person, but then dealing with one person, but also addressing kind of the audience at the same time. And I think the practice affords that if you do your reps in it.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, you got to do your reps though.
Cool.
Awesome.
So we got a bunch of good questions coming up. So Luke, I'll take in Luke.
Okay, great. Another guy called Luke.
Hey, Luke. Good to see another Luke around here.
Yeah, likewise.
So I have a question sort of around the like history context. You use the word ecology, and I like that, of practices that are like verbal Aikido. I've studied NVC, nonviolent communication, a bunch. And so I'm curious, like, at first I wanted to ask you about how you see verbal Aikido situated with other interpersonal communication practices, but I'm actually interested in even more that, but also like, you know, just the background of actual Aikido or like martial arts, just how you see what the, like, you know, you don't need to give me the whole history, but anything that you feel called to offer about like where this came from, how you developed it, and how you see it situated with all this other stuff. It's like 5 questions, so you can.
Well, where would you want to start, Luke? There's a lot of good stuff there. It's all be
Yeah.
very where do you want to start?
I guess maybe just the other practices that inform verbal Aikido and where you see them differing, or where you see them, you know, overlapping. Or
okay, well, let's just talk. You talked about NVC. I love NVC. Really appreciative of the everything that Rosenberg did on that. It's absolutely essential, I would say, and we actually integrate it as what we call a kata. A kata is like a sequence of movements. When you're coming back, and we can talk about that a little bit more today, maybe. But you know, when we talk about coming back to a centered expression, and that's the essence, that's the objective of NVC, is to not hurt people when you've got that violent sensation. It's non-violent communication. So if you're communicating towards another person, so what can you do to ensure or to limit as much as you can that your expression is not going to cause any harm to the other person, which is wonderful. Which, yes, of course, when we come back to that one posture that we're looking at today, this is key. That's key. So, for example, you know, if whatever situation you're in, you might say, okay, right here, just give me a moment to get centered. I get centered. Okay, and then you go, all right. So what I've noticed is this. What I've observed is that. Here's how I feel about that. Here's a need of mine, and how about we, and then a request. So that's the sort of movement that you'll go to when you've got that space, but you won't go directly there, especially if there's an oncoming attack. So I'd say NVC is really great for that sort of outward movement, so that expression from center. And where verbal Aikido sort of has its complementarity with that is it's to manage whatever's coming, to be able to preserve both yourself and the other person in that moment. That kind of gives a nice little sort of link to the history, I think, of Aikido, because in fact, that's where Mori Shiba, who was the founder of Aikido in the last century, he's not that old. So he was very, very highly trained martial artist in lots of different martial arts, but it was really after what they call Pacific War, so in part of the Second World War, that the atrocities really sort of made him go, we've got to stop something, we've got to find a way so that we can stop the violence. And he was kind of inspired, I think, a lot, and he was really interested in using what he had learned in martial arts, but to help it but as in a non-violent way, to be able to preserve the other person and preserve ourselves. So he learned all these techniques where, you know, some people will say Aikido is 3 millimeters away from being a deadly martial art, because you could break somebody's neck from certain positions, but you actually choose not to. You choose to lead them maybe to the ground peacefully, and or immobilize them in some way, but that they're not going to continue the attack, so that you've de-escalated the exchange, and rather quickly too. So I think that touches on 2 of the things that you talked about, Luke. Where do you go to from here?
That's great. Yeah, I can tell you're steeped enough in NVC, or I don't know enough. I'm excited. I love NVC, and I was like, I wonder how these fit together. So I'm excited to hear it sort of fits in for you. And I'm not quite sure what I would say the difference is if I had to express it myself succinctly, but I feel like maybe that'll emerge as I sort of see more. Maybe it's more of a sort of felt difference rather than much in the practice. But that was super helpful.
Okay, cool. Look forward to seeing you on the map. Okay. You have more questions, I think.
Yeah, we got two more. So I'll take in Tom. Tom, you had a good question. You're on mute, Tom. You're on mute, Tom.
There we go. I really love this approach, and I appreciate the metaphor of the physicality. That I think that's really meaningful to me. I guess my question is, after you've been doing this a while, how intuitive does it become? And actually, I want to sort of pick up on Valeria's question, because I think that's actually more interesting. What's the perception of other people around you? And if I could just put that in a personal way, like how do the people that you interact with day in, day out, I presume you have family members, do they regard it positively, or do they see it as annoying or inauthentic or irritating? I'm really fascinated with that dynamic.
That is, it's such a great question. And yes, yeah, I have family members, of course, and aware of this. That's something I was just talking with a fellow practitioner just before he came online, in fact, and it was that idea that there is an inevitable fall. In the sense that inevitably there's going to be that day where somebody comes up to you and goes, well, where's your verbal Aikido now? Right. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen. And it's that hugely learning moment, because I think one of the key aspects of this practice is humility, and to be able to sort of step back and sort of leave your ego at the door and be able to sort of be in sincerity with what's going on. Going, yeah, totally missed it there. Yeah, what would you have done? You know, so that would be a move in verbal Aikido, to be able to come back to self and then go towards the other, and then say, hey, you know, how could we work this in the future? And that would be the us movement. So so that kind of gives you sort of an idea. I think that's a key aspect to sort of to maintain that humility that we're always learning. That, you know, even Bruce Lee got, you know, his back broken when he turned at some stage, because even no matter how good you are at something, there's always going to be that moment where you're going to maybe be too tired and you're not going to be able to practice like you want to. That said, what I've just noticed about the practice is that anytime we've been able to do it and do it, you know, consciously, and that comes on to your next question, which is when it becomes sort of unconscious. But when you're able to do it and you're able to really feel that energy of it, that you come out of it feeling so connected to not only yourself, but the other person, the world, etc., as a whole. So I guess with my family and with people around me, when I first started, and sort of most sort of beginning practitioners share the same thing, it's that people will either they're trying to sort of push it on other people, and so people sort of can be very standoffish about it. But there is an awkwardness at the beginning, because you think it's about the technique, but it's not about the technique, it's about the posture. And really, the techniques enable the posture, or they can go sort of hand in hand, but it really comes back to that same thing of, you know, I have techniques to get to my me, I have techniques to get to the you, I have techniques to propose an us, but if I'm just using techniques, then I'm missing so much. I'm just, it's you know, I'm not really practicing. You know, for example, if I say to you, a U technique might be, well, what do you mean? Simple U technique. There's nothing new there for you. But if I say, well, what do you mean? Right, I've lost the posture there. I've used the technique, but there's no posture. So, but I have to have that sincerity. And I've noticed that the times that it hasn't worked is only the times where I've been off that posture. So it really is, I guess that's a final little share about my son as well, who's now 19, and who now actually he's learning, he's doing IT skills, and he's got a part-time job where he's on phones managing people hurling insults at him. And he said to me, it's not from conflict conversation, Dad, it's from insults to thank you. That's what he finally ends up with at the end. So it really is, what I've noticed with him is the fact that he grew up with it. He's very, very sort of, he will use it on me. you know, and as this is, we can all be, we can all sense that another person is attacking them, even if it's not their intention. So anytime he uses it, he'll say, one of his go-to moves is, well, how do you feel about that? Which is really great. But he does it with such sincerity. It's not the sort of, you know, 2-cent shrink that it sounds like. He actually has that interest of knowing, well, how do you feel about that? And when I noticed him using that, I noticed, okay, well, I gotta, he's feeling attacked. I gotta take a step back and maybe come at it from a different angle. So that's helped me a lot. And of course, him growing up as a teenager, all those hormones, etc. It has saved so many evenings. Because, you know, I was able to sort of get back to my center. Let's hear where he's coming from, because I know it could escalate otherwise. How's that on feedback, Tom? I'll try to answer as many questions there as possible.
If I can reflect something too, it's like, you know, it depends where it's coming from too. When someone's dunking on you, like sometimes it could be a bonding mechanism. This happens often with guys. It's like they tease you, and the best approach there is to, like what the pickup artists call agree and amplify. Just kind of say yes to it and kind of like make it even sound more ridiculous.
Yes,
you're coming from like a loving place to bond. Where sometimes when people dunking on you, they're trying to like make some ego move, or they're trying to like make you lose face, or they have some kind of like, you know, status hierarchy going on.
Yeah.
And that is when this technique is so beautiful. And it's like having that discernment when to use it. So it's so good to have that capacity, but not always use it. Sometimes it's just kind of like lean into the joke and be, and get laughed at or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, you choose your times. Basically, I think what I've noticed over the years of practicing is that, and this is going back to, I think, Luke's question earlier, which was about, or maybe it was another question, but there's just the idea of what happens when it becomes kind of, it becomes kind of almost like what we call unconscious competence. So you're able to do it, but you're not realizing you're doing it. And that's just been pointed out to me on many occasions that happens. That, okay, oh, you were doing verbal aikido there. I'm like, was it? Oh yeah, I guess I was. But it's not that idea that you have to use it at every moment. It's just that if it's useful and you think it's interesting to maybe preserve both yourself and the other person in this exchange, well then sure, of course, Peter. I mean, as much as any other guy, you know, you'll tease people, and teasing actually has that sort of effect of sort of gently nudging people towards things where you think they may need to work, or bonding, like you said. So yeah, you shouldn't, if you feel tension on it, well then yeah, it might be interesting to use it.
Cool. I think that's all the questions.
Okay, great.
Would you like to jump to the
yeah. Okay, so great. Thank you guys for the questions. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to see if I can share my screen again, so that just so you know what you're going to be working on. So here we go. So we're going to look at a sort of centered yes and a centered no. These are really simple movements that accompany that centered posture. And so it's like that step one. So you're coming back to centered, and you all know those words yes and no. There's nothing new there at all. All I'm asking you guys to sort of explore is how you are saying this. So this is true posture work. So one of the ways that you'll notice that you might have to use this centered yes or a centered no is to reply to what we call disbelief, aggressive challenges, or misinterpretation. So basically, if somebody says to you, really? Come on, you sure? Things like that. So anything that causes that sort of aggressively, that sort of idea of disbelief or doubt, they're throwing doubt at you, you might feel tension. Now, you might not. Like I said, some things could go over your head. But if you do feel tension in these situations, just a simple centered yes, extremely powerful, and kind of makes you feel like a tree trunk. So again, there's moves after that, but just that simple yes is again a technique that you can really simply put into place. If you think about how many times when if somebody says to you, are you sure? You go, yes, right. You will notice the energy escalating at that moment. So that's for the yes. The no, we're going to look at that as well. So if somebody misinterprets what you're saying, so in other words, if they say, so you're saying, and they exaggerate what you've said, That's often used in kind of gaslighting or you know, different sort of verbal tactics as well to win an argument. So just a quick reminder that Aikido is not about winning. You're not going to find Aikido in the Olympics, because it's about finding a balanced exchange or a harmonized energy. So what you're trying to do here, and this is key, is to avoid that thing we call jade. So jade, which is justify, argue, defend, or explain. So these are ways that you will notice an escalation in an exchange. And that's what we kind of do on the mat all the time. We're sort of observing how did the person respond, did it escalate from that? And we've kind of honed it down to lots of different moves that inevitably will sort of create either the exchange to suddenly open up and then fall in exchange, or just slowly, gently go down to a more conversational mode. So that's what we're trying to avoid, this justifying, arguing, defending, explaining. So if somebody says to you, as I said, are you really, did that really happen? And you go, yeah, and you start escalating again, that's your justifying it, your arguing, your defending, your explaining. So that's what we're going to try and do on the mat. I'm going to give you some key ways to do that. When you're doing it, just to really mark the fact that you are doing it, I'd like you to try and mark it with a silence. So when somebody says to you, are you sure, or really, that you just go, yes. And then you continue your thing without justifying, without explaining. So that is sort of giving you an opportunity to sort of return to that center and make sure you're returning to that center before you. So the exercise that you're going to do is going to be really simple. I'm going to ask you to start with, basically, there's going to be some people who are attacking. I know it's going to be hard for some people here, but again, you're helping people out. It's like if you're sort of throwing a punch on a mat, it's not to actually hit the person necessarily, although sort of the closer you try to go towards that, the more you're giving them an opportunity to practice. Let me give a little illustration. Peter, can we work on this just a little bit before so that people can see what they're doing? Okay, great. So what I'm going to ask you to do, Peter, is to tell me a little story about what you did last weekend. And I'm going to either, well, I'm going to start with the yes. So all you got to do is answer yes. And from that yes, just, you know, we'll see how you get on. I'm going to try it 2 or 3 times. And we'll look at it afterwards. Okay, so tell me a story. I'm going to throw some doubt in there. When you hear my doubt, all you got to do is say yes. Mark it with a pause and then continue. Okay?
Cool.
All right.
So last weekend, Camille and I got some sushi. It was got this like huge platter, and then we
really sushi.
Yes. And yeah, we got some cider from the LCBO, you know, some good ones, maybe a little bit too much cider.
Really good cider, really good cider.
Yes. And then we, you know, we went home, we got a little drunk. It was like the best sushi. Why I'm talking about sushi is because it was like the best sushi in a while, I think. And then we just had a really like lovely chat during the night. And
really, you were drunk and you had a lovely chat, really?
Yes.
Okay, pretty good. This time out on that. Really good work, Peter. We practiced this before, but well done. Yeah, do you want to talk us through what was happening to you there?
I felt like it was some pretty good yes game going on right there on my end, but yeah, sort of like just like kind of almost like taking the energy, like accepting all of it and just saying yes and just breathing and just allowing maybe the awkwardness to emerge and just let it be, and then just kind of like continue in the same tempo and pace that I was going on. And there's like, it's hard to describe, but there's like some energetic stuff going on in that moment.
Well, that's exactly what I want you guys to play around with. Is exactly what you mentioned, Peter, that energy of what's going on here. Of course, the word is just yes. And you are leaving that space, and you just to give you some feedback. The second one there was really good. It kind of destabilized me. As you were saying, the one about this really good cider, and you're just like, yes, very calm. And again, try and Peter's a great example here if you guys are going to be practicing this, because He did that so sort of centeredly. There was no yes, yes, yes. There was none of that going on there. It was just really just there. And again, even if you're not 100%, and don't see this as a binary idea, if you have to be either 100% centered or 0% centered, it's, you know, it's a scale, and you'll be, the closer you are to there and the more intention you have of getting there, the more that comes off.
And
one comments there. Yeah.
One thing that just coming up too is I was talking to some buddies about like culture war stuff. When people come to you and they just talk about something political, like it's like a existential given, and then it's like, how do you respond? Like, you don't buy into their frame, you don't want to like have an argument, but just saying no, but like no from like a loving place, almost not a place where you're judging or you're trying to like fight or whatever. And it's the same thing with that kind of yes. It's not like has no kind of like negative aggressive energy towards the other person. It's just but firm in your kind of like truth.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Okay, so that's what I'm going to get you guys to do on the mat first. So like I said, if you want to practice the yes, this is all the attacker has to do. So the person practicing will just tell a story about what happened last weekend, for example. And then the attacker will say, really? Are you sure? They're the key ways to attack. Basically say, really, maybe taking an aspect of it like I did with Peter. Good cider, really? It doesn't matter. So again, put the little bit of intonation there for a good doubt attack, and just see how that works out. If you want to practice the no, the centered no, you can we practice a little bit on that as well, Peter, just to show them. Okay.
Yep.
So so again, I'm going to try and set you up so that you can use a no on this. So I want you to tell me again, maybe a project that you have, and I'm going to exaggerate that, or I'm going to take it out of proportion, or I'm going to misinterpret it in some way, and then set you up to be able to throw back a no. So go on ahead.
So launching a course with Rebel Wisdom this week. It's going to be an 8-week course called Becoming a Live Player. I'm quite excited about it.
So you're trying to you're trying to train a new breed of players?
No. that was a little awkward, that no. No.
Okay, let's just so that's good, right? Okay, well that's enough to give them an idea of it, and excellent, absolutely, really good stuff there, Peter. But yes, you marked it with a space. I'm sorry, I took you a little bit off guard. What this is going to give, and if you want to take a little further today, because I know we're limited with time, but try and get to like a 1-2 move. So you'll notice that I'm in the me no, and then see if you can go to accompany the other person. This will lead us on to our next week, but this is just a very, very short, very small 2 movement. So if I say to you, so is that what you mean? You'll say, no. Would you like to hear more about this? Or would you like to, so what is it you'd like to know exactly? Or something like that. So try and move off to that, from that no to a movement towards the other person. So something like, no, what makes you say that? But this is a nice one. No, would you like to know more? Etc. So that's a really nice little, you'll feel that the 1 is no. So that's the step 1. And then the 2 is to the other person. Would you like to know more? And then back to the 1. Okay. So, Peter.
Yeah.
Do you have any shares on that? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I forgot I just was going to continue with the story when I said no, and I'm like,
okay,
all right, need that extra move. Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a chance to practice it. So continue with this idea about players. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm nervous now. Okay. So we're doing this Becoming a Live Player course, and it's kind of cool because there's tripart epistemics that we're using, first person, second person, third person, sort of like maps over to like your subjective truths, to your intersubjective truths, to your objective truths. And we're going to like have an ecology of practices that we're kind of co-discover together through this course / journey about how to be a live player.
So you're basically saying that, everybody should have the same truth at the end of the session?
No, that's not it. Would you like to no motivation.
Okay. All right. Okay. And it's hard to just be there with the no. I mean, of course you can say no, that's not it. Just go, no. Would you like to hear more? Much more powerful. Again, power is in that sort of essence of the words. So if you can just sort of use that no, would you like to know more? That really has a lot more sort of flow in it. And but good, really good stuff, guys. Yes, the realize somebody's noticing the raising curiosity in your voice at some stage. Okay. All right, guys. How do I get the? Can you get them into groups, or can I do that? Can I make?
Yeah. So how long would you
So
like?
yeah, really, just I think, you know, if we can get people in groups of about 3 or 4, and give about, you know, maybe 7 or 8 minutes practice, that should be more than enough people to get just a little feel for at least trying a couple of times a good centered yes, a centered no. Notice that if you do it once, twice, 3 times, the 3rd time people might start to feel, okay, enough, and they'll start to lose their center. So that's a really good thing to notice. Okay, can you go ahead and set up those rooms? I don't think I have the control.
I'm gonna just pause, stop the recording button now, because we're not gonna record the breakout rooms. And if anyone has to leave, just slip out if you don't want to do the breakout room, because I'm gonna just take a moment to organize the breakouts.